Okay, so you really sent us down a rabbit hole this
On
time.
the rabbit hole, indeed.
Yeah, with all this stuff about Cuba and,
Not to Cuba.
the Kennedy assassination, and
Yeah.
it's fascinating stuff.
It is.
Recently declassified documents, too.
That's right, straight from the National Archives.
Yeah, and there's a couple threads in these files that really stood out to me.
Absolutely, some very interesting stuff.
When you first sent this over, I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
we got to dive into this.
Yeah, we definitely need to unpack this and try to, figure out what the most revealing parts of all this are for everyone.
Exactly.
So we've got two main documents to work with here.
Okay.
The first one is a memo. It's marked secret.
Ooh, secret.
It's dated December 7th, 1993.
Okay.
And it has the very intriguing title of Cuba Tidbits from late November Swrack.
Cuba Tidbits.
Tidbits.
Mm.
Now, the second one, also marked secret,
Okay.
is a memo dated February 6, 1996.
Mm.
And that one is titled Write In to NV Tag by individual claiming former association with N. Bolton.
And Bolton.
And Bolton.
Okay, so let's start with that first one.
Sounds good.
That December 93 Cuba Tidbits memo.
Okay.
Right away, the first thing that I saw that was really interesting was this mention of Swrack transcripts
Swrack transcript.
from November 26th and 27th, 1993.
Okay.
Now, these transcripts, they document conversations between an American department official named Ramiro and then this guy, Rodolfo, who is the Honduran National Party controller.
Interesting.
Yeah, and when I saw that Swrack thing, I was like, what is that?
Right. It's not something you hear every day.
So I looked into it a bit.
Okay.
And it seems like it most likely refers to either like summaries or maybe even recordings of intelligence communications or interviews that were conducted as part of, some kind of specific operation or in a certain context.
Yeah, it makes sense given the subject matter.
Right. And the memo even specifies this is late November.
Right.
So that helps us really pinpoint, when these conversations actually took place.
Absolutely helps narrow things down.
Yeah. So within these transcripts, there's something that Rodolfo says that really stuck out.
Okay. What's that?
He claims that Fidel Castro, the
Yes.
Cuban president,
Right.
he was really unhappy with this idea of having Cuban elections.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's interesting right away because...
Yeah, because it makes you wonder, what was going on in the early 90s.
Exactly.
Was this just about internal Cuban politics?
Right.
Or could this be a hint at something bigger?
Yeah.
Like about the relationship between the U.S. and Cuba at the time?
For sure.
And what else might this statement not be telling us about Castro's real motivations?
That's a great point.
It's just a little snippet, but it really makes you think.
It does. And Rodolfo, he doesn't stop there.
Oh, really?
He goes on to say that the Honduran elections in 1993, they were, quote, already held in 1992 and would be repeated. Yeah, and the memo points out that this could suggest Castro was involved in trying to destabilize the political situation in Honduras.
Oh, wow. So maybe trying to rig things in his favor.
Potentially.
Wow.
Yeah, it's possible he was worried about the outcome.
Right. An unfavorable outcome for Cuba.
Yeah, maybe he thought that Honduras having a certain type of government would be bad for Cuba, so maybe he's meddling.
Interesting. So it's like a glimpse into this behind-the-scenes political maneuvering.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. It really makes you consider how much influence Cuba might have been trying to exert in Central America at that time.
It does. And this memo, it doesn't just focus on these conversations.
Oh, okay.
It also mentions this meeting that supposedly took place in Havana.
In Havana.
Yeah, in mid-May 1993.
Okay.
So there were 3 Cuban officials involved.
All right.
Rolando Navas, Miguel Arate, and Rafael.
Okay.
And they apparently went on this unofficial visit to Cuba.
Unofficial.
Yeah, so it seems like they were keeping things on the down low. And here's where things get even more intriguing.
All right, I'm listening.
These 3 guys, they reportedly met with Fidel Castro himself.
Wow, so they had direct access to the top.
It seems so.
That's pretty significant.
It is, and the memo, it points out that a source considered Miguel Arate.
Miguel Arate.
Yeah, to be a trusted friend of the Cubans.
Okay, so that's key.
Yeah, that detail suggests that there was some kind of established and possibly hidden communication channel between these guys and the Cuban leadership.
It makes you wonder about the real purpose of these unofficial visits.
I know.
Were they just social calls?
Well,
Or was there some serious exchange of information going on behind closed doors?
exactly. It's like a hint at these networks and relationships that we might not normally know about.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so then the memo shifts gears again.
Right.
And it jumps to this other conversation on November 27th, 1993.
Okay.
This time, it involves a Cuban official named Ruben.
Ruben.
And the memo clarifies that this is probably Ruben Suarez.
Got it.
He was in Managua with this woman, Maria Lopez.
Okay.
And someone you've probably heard of.
Oh, yeah.
General Fabian Escalante.
Escalante, the Kennedy assassination researcher.
The one and only.
Wow, so this is where the Kennedy assassination thread really starts to come into play.
It does.
Okay.
I'm all ears. So according to the memo, Escalante, he told Ruben and Maria that Brigadier General Fabian Escalante of the Font of the Ministry of Interior was handling the matter of Kennedy assassination research.
Wow.
And had information that could possibly identify the Kennedy assassins.
That's a huge claim.
Right.
So was this like an official Cuban investigation or something else?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, like was this formal research or more of a personal project?
Exactly. And it really makes you wonder about how involved Cuban intelligence was in looking into the assassination.
For sure.
And then to say that they might even be able to identify the assassins.
Yeah, that's really provocative.
It is, even if we don't know from this document what that information was or where it came from.
Right.
It still fits into this narrative that's been around for decades.
Oh, yeah.
About foreign involvement or knowledge of the assassination.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder if there were any geopolitical reasons for Cuba to be investigating this so intensely.
Yeah. What was their angle?
Right.
Now, get this. The memo concludes with a really direct order.
Okay, what's the order?
In all caps, it says, positively identify the Kennedy assassins.
Wow, that sounds so serious.
Doesn't it, like, it's straight out of a spy movie?
It really does. It highlights how important this was to someone.
Right. And it wasn't just some passing thought.
Yep.
This was a clear instruction likely given within a specific operation or investigation.
Wow.
It shows how seriously they were taking this whole question of who killed Kennedy.
It really does.
So to sum up this 1993 memo, we have these worries about Castro's views on elections. Those secret meetings with Castro involving people who were close to the Cuban government.
Yeah.
And then this shocking statement from General Escalante about having information that could potentially name the Kennedy assassins.
It's a lot to process.
It is. So what do you think is the most important thing for our listener to take away from this memo?
Oh, man, that's tough. There's so much there.
I know.
But for me, it's got to be that last part about Escalante.
Yeah.
While the political stuff is interesting and provides context,
Right.
The idea that a Cuban intelligence official believed they had information that could actually name the Kennedy assassins,
Yeah.
that's the real bombshell.
It is.
It makes you immediately want to know more.
I know. What was that information?
Yeah, exactly.
Where did it come from, and why hasn't it ever been made public?
Right. It's a huge mystery.
Okay, so we've covered that first memo from 1993.
The Cuba Tidbits.
Right.
Okay.
Now let's move on to that second document.
The one from 1996.
Yeah, the one about the write-in to NV-TAG.
NV-TAG. Okay, let's dive in.
So this memo, it's about a fax that was sent to the Denver office of NV-TAG on February 6th, 1996.
All right.
And just so everyone's on the same page, NV-TAG stands for the National Vetting Team Activity Group.
That's a mouthful.
I know.
So what do they do?
Well, they were most likely an organization that reviewed and processed, really sensitive information.
Oh, okay. So they were the ones who decided what was credible and what wasn't.
Yeah, and also probably how declassified information would potentially impact things.
Right.
So the fact that someone reached out to them
Yeah.
suggests they thought their claims needed that official review process.
That makes sense.
So this fax that they got, it was about intelligence that they had received on February 2nd, 1996.
Okay.
And it was an unsolicited 2-page fax from a guy named Robert Plumley.
Robert Plumley.
Yeah, he was also known as just Plumley in some places.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the way this fax is set up is kind of strange.
Oh, how so?
So the first page is like a direct note from Plumley to NV-TAG. Okay.
But then the second page is a whole other letter.
A letter within a fax.
Yeah. It's dated January 28th, 1996.
Okay.
And it's from this guy, Robert Vernon, and it's addressed to W.M.R. Plumley.
W.M.R. Plumley.
a.k.a. W.M.H. Pearson.
Oh, wow. So there are multiple names being thrown around here.
Yeah, it's a bit confusing.
It is.
But let's start with that first page.
Okay. Plumley's message.
Yeah, so he says something really cryptic.
What's that?
He says, quote, "People know what is coming down the pike."
That sounds ominous.
It does, right? Like he knows something big is about to happen.
Yeah, like some major revelation or event.
Exactly.
Wow.
And he also mentions a bad play from some people he knows.
Bad play.
Yeah, and he says this is in reference to The Matter.
The Matter.
Which makes it sound even more like a spy movie.
It does.
And then he adds that he's already talked about this with both the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and the House.
So he's claiming to have taken this to some very high levels of government. Yeah, it seems like he's trying to say he's not just some random guy making things up.
Right. He's trying to establish his credibility.
Exactly. And then to make things even more intense.
Okay.
He talks about closed-door testimony from 1990 and 1993.
Testimony about what?
He doesn't say.
Oh, okay.
But he makes it clear that he wants to find another way to contact NVTAG.
Aside from this fax.
Yeah, he says, in case something goes wrong.
Whoa, so he's worried about something.
Definitely, it creates this sense of urgency.
Yeah.
Like there's some kind of risk associated with the information he's sharing.
It sounds like he believes he has some really sensitive knowledge.
Yeah.
And he wants to make sure it gets to the right people, but he's also concerned about his own safety.
Right, or maybe about protecting the information itself.
That makes sense.
Okay, so let's get into that second page.
The letter from Robert Vernon.
Yeah, so this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, what does Vernon say?
So he starts off by saying, in November 1980, I sabotaged the Denver magazine regarding a non-assassination article.
He sabotaged a magazine.
Yeah, and he's totally upfront about it.
Wow. Why would he do that?
Well, he says he did it because the documents and information that he had given to the magazine to back up his claims, he claims those were also being given to the Denver NVTAG.
So he was trying to prevent the information from getting out there.
It seems so.
That's quite a confession.
It is. He's admitting to messing with the press.
Yeah, and all to stop an article that wasn't even directly about the assassination.
Right, but it apparently did have some connection to events he was involved in.
And he didn't want that information to come out.
Nope. Wow. And he goes on to say that boxes of government documents, pictures, names, and dates were turned over to Denver magazine.
Boxes of documents.
Yeah, he even names the people who were involved.
Okay, who are they?
So there was Doris Hager, the editor, Peter Boyles, the writer Doe Vaughn, the researcher.
Okay.
And, of course, Vernon himself.
So they all had access to these potentially sensitive documents.
It seems so, and he claims that the information he tried to suppress was contained within those materials.
Interesting.
Yeah, it raises a lot of questions about what exactly was in those documents.
It does.
Okay, so then Vernon drops this bombshell.
Okay.
He claims that Plumlee actually went to see him
before the article was published.
Yeah, and confronted him about incriminating statements that Vernon had made to Denver magazine.
Oh, wow. So Plumlee was trying to shut things down.
It seems so.
And how did Vernon react?
Well, he says he changed his notes.
He changed his notes?
Yeah, to try to discredit the article and distance himself from his past.
His past involving what?
He mentioned something called N.W. Bolton and the Cuban desk and his Cuban friends.
N.W. Bolton, the Cuban desk?
Yeah, and we don't know for sure what N.W. Bolton refers to.
Right. It's not explained in the memo.
Yeah, but it's clearly connected to Vernon's activities and that Cuban desk thing.
Yeah.
So it could be a code name for an operation or maybe a specific group.
That makes sense given the context.
Right. It definitely sounds like he was trying to cover his tracks.
Yeah. Trying to hide his past involvement with something.
Exactly.
And that mention of the Cuban desk.
Yeah.
That really stands out, especially after we talked about the Cuban angle in that earlier memo.
It does, doesn't it?
It's like a little breadcrumb.
Yeah. And remember, the first memo was all about potential Cuban involvement in the Kennedy assassination.
Right.
But this one, it hints at individuals who might have ties to Cuban intelligence or operations.
So maybe they're connected somehow?
Is possible.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if these are just separate investigations or events that might actually be linked at a deeper level.
Exactly. And then there's the time difference.
Right. 3 years between the two memos.
Yeah. So could this information in the 1996 memo be a result of something that happened earlier?
That's possible.
Or is it a totally separate line of inquiry that eventually crossed paths with those earlier investigations related to Cuba and the Kennedy assassination?
That's a great question.
So Vernon, he goes on to say that he never actually saw the Denver magazine article.
You ever saw it?
Nope. He says he didn't want to.
Okay.
Especially after meeting with Plumlee.
Right.
And this other guy, Paul Lee, from the, quote, N.W. Bolton Denver contract div.
N.W. Bolton again?
Yeah.
Wow.
And this is where Vernon's story takes a dark turn.
Oh, no, what happened?
He claims that Plumlee threatened him and his associates.
Threatened them?
Yeah, and that his house in Grant, Colorado was firebombed.
Oh, my God, that's terrible.
He also mentions being attacked and finding police reports about an incident that happened in August 1981.
Wow, so this was serious stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like things got dangerous.
It's a reminder that these kinds of historical narratives, they can have real-world consequences for the people involved.
Absolutely.
So what happened to Vernon after all this?
Well, he says that he made peace with his enemies.
Made peace?
Yeah, and went back to work as a pilot.
Okay.
Until the Contra thing blew up.
The Contra thing?
Yeah, which I assume refers to the Iran-Contra affair.
Oh, right.
And after that, he testified 3 times to the Senate and Congress.
About all of this?
He doesn't say specifically.
Okay.
But then he makes this really important point.
What's that?
He says, quote, "The remedy matter is contained within that testimony as well as the Boyles article."
The Boyles article, so that must be the article from the Denver magazine.
Right, the one he tried to sabotage.
Okay.
And he mentions that his testimony is currently classified as top secret committee sensitive.
Oh, wow.
But he thinks that eventually it'll be declassified.
So he's basically saying that there's important information hidden within his testimony.
Yeah, maybe even a resolution to whatever the matter is.
We can't know for sure until it's declassified.
Exactly.
Wow.
Now, the memo, it adds a couple more details at the end.
Okay, like what?
It says that Plumlee signed the fax on January 28th, 1996 from Miami Station.
Miami.
Yeah. And it mentions previous contact with N.W. Bolton 95, and that there's a file on all this in the Denver NVTAG office.
So this N.W. Bolton thing keeps popping up.
Okay, so to recap this second memo, it's full of all kinds of claims.
Oh, yeah.
Allegations of media sabotage threats, classified testimony, and these hints at connections to Cuban activities through that Cuban desk.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is. So when you compare it to that first memo about Cuba, what stands out to you?
Well, it's hard not to think about that Cuban desk reference.
Right.
Because the first memo, it puts Cuba front and center.
Yeah.
But this one, it hints at these individuals who might be involved in Cuban intelligence operations.
So maybe they're connected somehow.
It's possible, even though at first glance the direct links aren't totally clear.
Right.
The 1993 memo focuses on potential Cuban knowledge about the Kennedy assassination, while this 1996 memo, it's more about allegations of obstruction and classified information.
From people who seem to be engaged in covert activities.
Exactly.
But with that interesting link to Cuba.
Right. That Cuban desk mention feels like a breadcrumb.
It does.
Like there's something more to discover there.
Yeah. Makes you wonder if this is all part of the same story.
And then going back to NVTAG.
Yeah.
Why do you think Plumlee decided to reach out to them with these serious allegations?
Well, as we talked about before, NVTAG was likely responsible for evaluating information.
Right.
Especially in situations that involve national security.
Yeah.
So Plumlee contacting them, especially since he was worried about things going wrong, it suggests that he thought NVTAG was the right place to take these claims.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Maybe he thought they were the only ones equipped to handle classified or really sensitive information.
That's a good point. It's amazing how these documents can give us these little glimpses into the history surrounding the Kennedy assassination.
Absolutely. And all the different leads and allegations that came up over the years.
Even decades after the event itself.
It's a reminder that people were still coming forward with information.
Yeah.
And that government agencies were actively working to process and document everything.
It shows just how big of an impact this event had.
And how many unanswered questions there still are.
So for everyone listening today, we've gone through 2 declassified documents.
That you sent us.
Yeah, thanks for those.
Of course.
The first was a memo from 1993 that suggested Cuban intelligence might have been interested in the Kennedy assassination.
Right.
And even claimed they had information about the assassins.
A big claim.
And then we looked at a memo from 1996 that was filled with allegations of media sabotage threats and classified testimony.
From people who may have been involved in secret activities.
And who might have connections to Cuba.
Exactly.
Now, these documents, they don't give us all the answers.
No, they don't.
But they do raise some really fascinating questions.
They do.
Especially that possible connection between Cuban intelligence and the claims made by those individuals.
Right. It's a link that needs more exploration.
It really makes you wonder what else is out there just waiting to be uncovered.
Absolutely.
So what are your thoughts? What other questions do these details bring up for you?
For me, I keep coming back to that Cuban desk reference.
Yeah.
And who these people really were.
Right. Were they just researchers or were they something more?
Exactly. And what exactly was in those boxes of documents?
And why did Vernon feel the need to sabotage that magazine article?
So many questions.
It feels like we've just scratched the surface of something much bigger.
Like we're only seeing a tiny piece of a much larger puzzle.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's been quite a journey.
It has. I can't wait to see what other mysteries we uncover.
Me too.